Hi everybody and welcome to the next instalment of our Conversation Aviation podcast and videocast. Hopefully you all know me. My name's John Franklin. I'm Head of Safety Promotion here at IASA. And for this next session I'm really excited because I've got a really great guest to join me here in person in the studio in Cologne. I've got Nuno Aghdassi from the Portuguese Accident Investigation Authority, and we've known each other probably. Well, in fact, you were the first person I ever met on an external business trip when I came to IASA like 12 years ago when we met in Paris at Air France
absolutely.
For that high-risk analysis meeting with Michel Pearce and with Bertrand de Courvois.
Absolutely, very good memory.
I remember that really vividly. It was like, I just left the Air Force and immersing in this world of civil aviation. So you really helped me at a personal level with that transition.
Very kind.
It's great to have you here. So maybe you could start by introducing yourself a little bit about your background in aviation and what you do.
Well, I've been involved in aviation and in safety for 23 years this year, and this journey has been both with aircraft manufacturers from the safety and accident investigation role, with the commercial operators. Also in an SMS role, and then of course with IASA at working groups, etc., and also teaching at Cranfield. So really, during this journey, I've always been involved in aviation, and very particularly so in safety. And since April 2020, I'm with the Portuguese Accident Investigation Authority. So really trying to bring all of that experience together and apply it to my investigation work.
And I think. So the interesting topic we're going to talk about is the role of learning in safety and the importance of creating the right environment in organisations so that learning is something natural, and it's something that you've been involved in throughout your career in all sorts of different capacities.
Yeah, so really I think the learning piece is a critical one when it comes to ensuring that we continuously evolve in terms of safety, because without the learnings of the past, then it's very difficult to avoid making those same mistakes going forward, right? And so when we look at the past, we see that aviation, like other things in the world and in society, is very much a cyclical process. And therefore, many of the issues that were encountered in the past can manifest themselves in the future if we're not careful, and particularly so in the areas of human factors and organizational factors. And
I think that's one of the things where the safer the system gets and the further in the past accidents become, it's easy to forget almost the blood that the rules and the system we have now is written on. I think that's, it's that kind of, it's easy to forget, we haven't had a big accident for a number of years, and it's remembering that and continually trying to strive to improve. I think that's such a key thing.
Yes, well, it's easy to get complacent because of what you've mentioned. And if we look at aviation from a technical point of view, there's been great progress from the technological side. And this has helped accident prevention tremendously. For example, the CFITS is a good example where the proliferation of eGPIAAF has greatly helped in reducing CFITS. That's the top accident. However, there's also examples where complacency can be a problem, right? And so a very clear example of that is that all of the issues which transpired following the 737 MAX accidents, they take us back somewhat to the DC-10 cargo door locking mechanism issues of the 70s, which also led to the loss of 2 aircraft, which led to the grounding of the aircraft. And ultimately, the issue was only resolved when effective safety measures were put in place. So there are parallels there, and it is easy for us to miss the lessons of the past if we don't really keep a focus on staying on top of things and learning.
And I think that's where collaboration is so important. So if you look at a system level, it's between all of the stakeholders, people like organisations like ours who write the rules, and then all of our different collaborative stakeholders. There's the the importance of that collaborative knowledge, first of all, and how that shapes the trajectory of aviation, if that makes sense.
Yes, I mean, this learning comes from all of these parts, right? I mean, and the safety investigation authorities are but one agent, if you like, in the safety system. But then yourselves, in terms of the regulator, the national aviation authorities, the operators, the maintenance, etc., all of these have their own responsibilities from a safety point of view. And if all of the actors do their piece and also share intelligence, safety intelligence, among the different stakeholders, then certainly that is an important step towards progressing forward in terms of safety.
Yeah, I think, and that's interesting. The first time we met, we were talking about how do we better learn from high-risk occurrences, how do we identify them, and I think it's interesting to see now where we're going with the Data for Safety project that kind of turns that into a proper collaborative reality. All the work that's done in the collaborative analysis groups that you've been part of is it's the system sharing that knowledge and using that to help us all focus on what's important. I always quite funny when I was talking to somebody the other day. People still refer to the UK CEA and their significant 7, and we have our key risk areas in the safety risk portfolio. It's funny how somebody even last week referred to them as the Magnificent 7, which I think there's a kind of word challenge there. But I think it's all, first of all, us all agreeing, yes, these are the key problems, and these are the things we need to solve together as a real kind of almost like an important starting point. I think that's where, particularly as accident investigation authorities, even when there aren't the big high profile accidents, it's what you see in the kind of lower level, the serious incidents, and thankfully the accidents where there is no negative outcome, is what are the system level things that we see that we can keep an eye on those warning signs to continue to feed the system. I think it's such an important role.
Yes, I mean, as you quite rightly mentioned, increasingly there are fewer high-profile accidents. Now, this is, of course, within commercial aviation, right? Nevertheless, there's still things that you can pick up by investigating serious incidents, by looking at trends, by doing a proper data collection and analysis, which can help you improve safety and avoid future unexpected accidents, even the sporadic ones. However, within other domains, if you look at general aviation, if you look at, for example, ATOs, etc., there's still a lot that we can learn from there. And these are areas within general aviation, for example, Annex 1 aircraft. These are areas where every year there's still a lot of fatalities which occur. And in fact, it's an area where I think collaboratively there's still a lot of learning to be had and a lot of work to do to try and address some of those issues.
Yeah, and that's something that we've recognised. We've just, in fact, at the Aero show in Friedrichshafen, we just launched the next phase of our GA roadmap, and the increased collaboration on understanding GA safety issues, promoting the most important things is kind of, we've done a lot of work on the rules and a lot of things on developing technology improvements, so with Part 21 Light and things like that. So this is where that's the next step of what we're calling GA Flight Path 2030 plus, which is the kind of how do we go on to the next phase. So if we move on to, particularly in terms of recent investigations you've done, you've been involved in, or you've seen over the last 2-3 years, are there common themes that you see that perhaps people would be interested to understand a little bit more about?
Yes, well, within the last couple of years, one of the things that we have noticed is several accidents within precisely the training domain, ATOs and flying schools. And this is a real challenge, I think, in terms of the schools responding to the demand post-COVID-19 for pilots and qualified pilots. And a lot of the schools are trying to respond to this demand while also ensuring they maintain the necessary levels of competency. However, one of the things that we have noticed in accidents and incidents is that, in fact, some of the levels of competency are still quite low, and also in terms of the experience of instructors, there's also quite a lot of improvement in that field as well. So this is an area which we feel needs addressing going forward. It's really to ensure that we don't overlook the necessary standards in our haste to try and respond
you feed people into the system.
And the same applies, of course, not only to the flying piece, but in terms of providing the system with sufficient technicians, maintenance technicians, air traffic controllers. The whole system, I think, is feeling the stress right now. And
I think certainly from what we've seen and the intelligence we have from the wider community is that a lot of people, particularly a lot of the more experienced people, in their kind of 50s and into their 60s, have started retiring and leaving the system in much bigger numbers than perhaps they ever did, to be replaced by a new generation who just don't have the level of experience. And it's, as a system, it's not something the system can't handle, but the system needs to be aware that there is a bigger group of people who are still learning on the job, and how we handle that as they feed from the ATOs into the airline and the operational community, and similarly with technicians, and as people become technicians in the commercial world, how do they build the experience on modern aircraft types that the people that have now retired have left and taken that experience with them.
But this example is very good because it shows how aviation is cyclical.
Yeah.
And a lot of the new people who are joining aviation today, they have not lived within that era where accidents were more common. So the idea of an aviation accident is not at the forefront of their minds. And therefore, it's very difficult for them sometimes to appreciate the importance of safety or their role in safety, right? And so
they just take safety almost as a given.
As granted, correct. And this is where I think the learning piece becomes important, because without the memory of the past and the learnings which we have gained in the past, as you were alluding to earlier, then we run the risk of, in future, making some of the same mistakes. Because again, some of the newer generations, they haven't experienced some of those things that some of the older staff
have been through
and have a greater appreciation for.
I guess if you've seen or know people who've been impacted by the consequences of an accident or a serious incident, then you have a much greater personal connection to that. And if you never touched it and it's never happened to anybody
something very far in the distance,
then the risk of doing something, perhaps taking a shortcut on a procedure or
doesn't seem so impactful.
I don't know anybody that's ever anything bad's ever happened to. Correct. So it's all fine. And I think that's where educating people and how so one of the challenges, I guess, that the more we can learn and open ourselves up to the potential for negative things to happen, then hopefully we do the right thing more often.
And there's one other thing, whereas technology is typically always on an evolving curve, human is cyclical. And this is why today many of the issues across the different domains are dependent on human performance, human factors. And in terms of human factors as well, the importance of organizational conditions and the organizational factors which impact the human in its decision making and in its performance. So the point really is that these are the areas which I think as a society, as a community, we need to keep an eye on and to tackle and be mindful that although there have been a lot of progress in commercial aviation through understanding safety-mindedness, SMS, there are other areas like maintenance, like air navigation service providers, manufacturing, production, where this is not to say that they are unsafe, but the concepts of SMS, the formal concepts, are relatively new.
And in fact, you kind of almost read my mind into where we wanted to. The next part of the discussion was, so in organisation, the appreciation of the role of human factors and as individuals. What challenges and what things have you seen in your career? How organisations can create the right environment for reporting and learning and things to take place, So so the organisations are actually able to understand the human factors challenges they face in their organisation and how they can do that.
I think an organization has to be very humble when it comes to safety, and certainly the decision makers within that organization have to understand that safety does start at the top, and it starts not only from talking about safety, but actually putting it into practice through examples. And examples also start at the top. So it is not just mentioning safety in a newsletter a couple of times.
Yes, safety is our number one priority.
It's very easy to do that, but people pick up on implicit signs if you are not actually putting things into practice. And I would say that is one of the key things. You can have your manuals all in order, you can have your safety policy, etc., all sitting on a shelf. But the bottom line with safety is an attitude thing, and this follows the example that comes from the top.
And I always love read some interesting books, particularly the one by Clive Lloyd on next generation safety leadership. I love that he talks in that book about, are your values lived by your organisation in terms of safety, by the operational workforce, the management and the leadership all the time, every day, or do they sit on the shelf to be nicely looked at and brought out looking all pristine and pleasant when the auditor comes? And it's the difference between that. It's all very well you can easily follow all the rules and have everything right, but is that the way the organisation works every day? Does it really try and understand the whole work as imagined, work as done piece? And what's the difference between the way we think people do the job versus how they actually do the job every day? And it's learning where those gaps are, for me, is one of the big things.
Well, the same way that organizations lay out responsibilities for their employees in terms of, say, for example, cost control, financial control, etc. Likewise, responsibilities should be laid out at the different levels for safety and performance. When it comes for performance review of employees, safety should also be included rather than just production or sales or the commercial aspects, because otherwise safety is just going to be, as you mentioned, something that's sitting on a shelf. It's something that is talked of, but not lived within that organization.
In fact, one of my favourite phrases I heard someone else talk about was the concept of, particularly as a safety team in an organisation, do you do safety to the people in your organisation or with them, and then have that operational, the continual engagement where all of the people understand their role in safety, they're held accountable for that, they have clear responsibilities for what that means in the organisation every day, and everybody works to that same goal, if that makes sense.
And on the topic of learning, that they sit down and talk about and learn from each other. I mean, managers will often sit with their teams and talk about commercial issues or operational issues, etc. But to sit down very specifically at a team level, at a departmental level, and discuss safety, discuss challenges, discuss possible improvements, that is something which is sometimes overlooked.
Yeah, and I think as we move particularly towards the busy summer period for aviation this summer, and I think certainly if we're going to cope with all the challenges the industry is probably going to be faced with this summer, with we hear about skill shortages, we hear about not having enough staff in certain areas, is that team level operational conversation to solve problems and learn as the summer goes on, particularly if we've got lots of new people as well in different roles in different organisations, is going to be so important, and particularly for managers to create the environment so that's a normal conversation this summer.
Absolutely. Well, definitely within certainly commercial air transport in particularly, I think it's going to be a challenging summer because of these points that you mentioned. I think it's probably going to be the most normal summer that we're going to have since
kind of feels exciting and scary all at the same time.
Exactly. But certainly in Portugal, we have a very cyclical trend in terms of safety, and in the summer period, we do experience a lot of mishaps involving firefighting, involving general aviation, and particularly Annex 1 operations, Incidentally, both of these fall within the remit of national regulations. And this poses challenges for safety investigation authorities, especially within Annex 1 operations, because when you have intra-European operations, then different rules apply and it becomes difficult. But this is the challenge and definitely an area where I think through collaboration, through learning from each other, we can try and maintain the necessary freedoms which are required for some of the sectors of general aviation, but also applying the necessary standards and regulations to make sure that some of these areas are not every year the result of many fatalities. And certainly in general aviation and firefighting, every summer across Europe, in fact,
we see that.
There's quite a lot of accidents and fatalities as a result of that.
Yeah, and it's interesting. We had a discussion this morning with the team. We have one of our team who specifically focuses on GA safety promotion, and he was at a local event here in this part of Germany at the weekend, and they were talking about the topic of personal minimas and this idea of applying some basic kind of fundamental principles from commercial operations into GA and things that help make commercial aviation so safe. And he did a sort of show of hands how many people have their own personal minimums to decide whether they go flying or not, and it was something that very few people kind of looked out the window and tried to make the best decision, but it wasn't quite as structured.
Correct.
And there's something that particularly we're working on is how can we provide, not to make things overcomplicated and stop people flying, but how can we give, particularly in the GA community, pilots some organised structure that can help them make better decisions with the information.
And this is where we can learn from accidents of the past as well. Because this is an area where there is a lot of repetition in terms of the accident types and the issues that pilots encounter. And therefore, promoting that information, spreading that information, and some of the work that you're trying to achieve as well, I think goes a long way towards trying to create a better structure for, especially within GA.
Yeah, that makes sense. And in the commercial context, do you see around airports particularly, do you see challenges? Do you have serious incidents with damage or people getting injured on the ramp and things like that? Is that something that...
Yes, well, ground damage is something that we see happen quite often. We receive reports of that as well. Again, this may be related with the influx of new staff, a lot of seasonal turnover. Also an increase in operations without a doubt. However, again, this is something that we need to work on together to try and address. Another issue which we have seen quite often and quite regularly are injuries resulting from passengers going up and down air stairs. And this is an issue that has been happening regularly as well, particularly on the 737. And again, these are repetitive issues which we can learn on and see how we can better address.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's looking at all of the data we see, whether it's us at European level at a collaborative activity or individual organisations, or even as an individual worker in commercial aviation, or even an individual GA pilot. What am I doing? How can I learn from anything that happens, from people around me and anything I can find, so that next time I'm in a better position to make things better? And I think that's
absolutely.
That's the worthy cause of all of
absolutely. And also, it's really the reason I'm here today is to attend the CASIA meeting with EASA, and this is an opportunity for safety investigation authorities to share their experience with EASA and also to learn from EASA.
And I think it's interesting to highlight to the wider industry who might not be aware of these kinds of activities to know that, so one of the reasons the reason why Nuno's here is we have this collaborative meeting every year on a regular basis between EASA and the investigation authorities across Europe, to share lessons learned. We're talking from our side about safety promotion. Different accident investigation boards are talking about both key accidents, important safety topics. I know certainly one of the other things we haven't mentioned is people might not be aware of in terms of an area where there are also quite a lot of accidents is in parachuting operations.
Correct, yeah.
It's something we've got a big campaign on coming over the summer, and something I know I'm going to talk about with the Incassia meeting this week. So
it's a good example of collaboration.
Yeah, it is indeed. And certainly there are lots of investigation boards who've learned a lot from investigations of the past, and using that experience in order to help the wider community is such an important thing.
Absolutely, yeah.
What a perfect finish.
Excellent.
Thank you very much. Thanks for joining me. And
Thank you.
Look forward to seeing you and hearing you, or hopefully you'll look forward to seeing and hearing us on the next session. Thanks very much, and be safe.
Thank you. Bye-bye.